I wanted to speak with you briefly today about domestic violence. As a lawyer and an advocate for human rights, it has been my experience working in the criminal court system on pro bono and low bono matters that domestic violence is very prevalent at all levels of socioeconomic status. It does not affect just poor people. It does not affect just minorities. It affects people of all races, colors, religions, all levels of the society that we live in. It gets hushed up a lot more in certain types of communities, particularly ones where people have the financial resources to escape. And I want to talk a little bit more about that topic. Escaping from domestic violence is not just an economics issue. It's primarily a psychological one. There's nothing sometimes holding people there other than the psychological bond that they have with the abuser. That being said, it is often very difficult to break that bond. It is often difficult for even the person to realize that that is even happening to them. But if people don't have a social network, if they're cut off from their friends and family, as is often the case with abusive situations where an abuser will try to prevent the abused person from connecting to others so that they are able to hide the abuse from anybody that would even know it was really happening. And the person who's being abused is often too embarrassed to discuss it with their friends or family. And if there's no economic fail-safe, no place for them to go, whether it is to friends and family or whether they have the financial resources to go and move out on their own, then the cycle of abuse may be prolonged. And sometimes it can result in some very serious consequences. It has certainly been my experience that people are often, by the time they wind up in the criminal court system, there has been some violent activity, whether it is an assault, whether it is unfortunately escalated to a homicide. Several years ago, I had the privilege of representing a battered woman in a 5.5-week jury trial in Manhattan, and we were successful in getting an acquittal in that case, but it was a very, very long, hard fight, and there were many, many collateral consequences of it, including the fact of disrupting the person's family life with their child. So, this is a very serious topic, and it is, we often push it under the rug. We think about the drama of it, like I grew up having watched The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett, which was an extremely well acclaimed, made-for-TV movie, but it was sort of an extreme situation because the person was really, really passive. And often the domestic violence situations are not just a one-sided abusive person who's, battering somebody into submission. There's often an interaction between the two people that can escalate the situation, and not just being that somebody's, going off kilter and without any provocation. Sometimes the abused person may even push the other person's buttons as a means to fight back, but often has no physical strength to defend themselves. So it's a very complicated issue, and one that is the subject of a new book that is coming out. And wanted to just make a plug for this book, Something to Be Brave For by Priscilla Bennett. I have not read the book yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. It comes out in April, and I'm hoping that it'll be similar in terms of likability and intrigue to Anita Shreve's Strange Fits of Passion, which I read prior to actually having the trial, and really, really enjoyed it. The interesting thing about Priscilla Priscilla Bennett is that she is a nurse who has had a lot of experience with working with people who have been involved in domestic violence situations. So she was inspired to write this book, and proceeds of the book are going to the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which can be found at nnedv.org. nnedv.org. And in New York, for women who, or men who have issues relating to domestic violence, they can get help. And I would encourage people to reach out to hotlines or to organizations. There are national level hotlines where someone can make a call and they can give you lots of options and advice. Don't be afraid to go into a shelter situation if you have to keep your family and yourself safe. There are shelters that will take children as well. Sometimes people are reluctant to go and to proceed if they are concerned that they will have to leave behind a child or children or other family members, and concerned about retribution or concerned about the safety otherwise of those family members. But there are options, there are resources. The Steps to End Family Violence by Edwin Gould organization is one such place in New York. There's also Safe Horizons. There's lots of different choices, and I would encourage people, if they need help, to go and get it. The other thing I would say is that it is really important to report these type of situations to the police, obtain an order of protection, and live by it. Don't sort of cave under the emotional pressure of, well, he said or she said, I was sorry, I won't do it again. This is a complex psychological phenomenon of abusing situations. And if you obtain an order of protection, restrain from and refrain from reuniting with your abuser, because you will lose the protections of that potentially. You will also call into question, should the incident escalate, whether the abuse was real, whether you sort of brought it on yourself, which is a common phenomenon when you do voir dire and you hear jurors talk about well, why didn't they leave the relationship? Or, maybe the person had it coming. You get both sides of that, and you get the other flip side of if something bad happens and the person is faced with, God forbid, a situation where they're having to say they have a self-defense type of a claim. It becomes more difficult to prove this if you don't make reports to the police, if you don't try to get orders of protection and to live by them. So there are systems in place. Brooklyn has led the way. Retired District Attorney Charles Hines had established what has become a very well known model for dealing with domestic violence issues. It's been adopted by other states. Other district attorneys have followed that, and the system is designed in most instances in New York to provide people with options. And for those people facing these issues, I encourage you to reach out and to try to get some help. And I appreciate this opportunity to speak about domestic violence and my work in the system. It certainly is meaningful to me. I'm also involved in the human trafficking part in Brooklyn, dealing with people who are being victimized as human trafficking victims. Prostitution, as we know it, is not simply always a choice in quotation marks. And these are the types of issues that I'm involved with, in addition to my corporate practice, that make me feel that I'm having some impact in my community. And I, again, appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today.